Our next time we do a child dedication service is going to be in December. So if you have anybody kind of in that vein and who would like to do that, that'll be later on this year in December. I love it so much. It's so cool. I love seeing those children and the growing number of young families in our church. It makes me so happy to see. We are in a series right now called No Ordinary Family. And we're using the book of Genesis to really guide us through this series. And we're talking about, because all these different families we see in Genesis, they're dysfunctional. They really are. And we see that 2 weeks ago when we looked at Adam and Eve and just all their flaws and failures. And then we looked last week at Noah. And we didn't talk about Noah and the ark and all that fun like win that Noah had. We looked at his drunken, naked evening where his sons had to really honor him, even in a time of shame and in one of his not great moments. And I think as we look at Genesis and these flawed individuals and these flawed families, it gives me a lot of comfort that God still chose to use them and had a purpose in their life and does so in our flawed and imperfect relationships as well. And so today is going to be a different day. This is not a typical Sunday at Discovery because I've actually asked my wife, Janie, of almost 20 years, to join me on stage. And this is not, everybody, a moment where we're trying to lift up our marriage and say, hey, look at us, do it like us. We're perfect and we got this thing handled. No. We mirror the marriages and families in Genesis. And God still chooses to use us and has a purpose for us. To show you how messed up we are, a couple of months ago when I even told Janie, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you on Mother's Day come and teach with me and we can do this? And here I am not even thinking about how this would matter to her, because I'm like, this is a day that should be honoring to you, where you can kind of chill out and relax, and what she hears is, come do my job for me on Mother's Day. That's how empathetic and caring I am, apparently.
Well, despite that, I'm usually very glad when Matt asks me to teach sometimes. But a couple weeks ago, we got in an argument. And I cannot even remember what the fight was about. But I vividly remember as it's happening thinking, we have no business being on that stage talking about our family. And then he kept telling you all that I was going to be up here. So it got me more annoyed because I'm stuck and I have to do it. I can't get out of it. But over the past few weeks, as I've listened to Matt teach about these not ordinary families in Genesis, I hear what he's communicating to all of us. We see Adam and Eve jacked up and Noah's bad choices. And next week, he's going to be talking about Abraham. And he is a hot mess. And I think, you know what? We fit right in. So this is going to be easy. Not easy, but I'm so honored that we get to share this today because, like the families in Genesis, we want our family to pursue God's purpose for us. And we know that we're going to get closer to Him and we're going to find that purpose in the middle of the mess. Now, I'm not sitting up here as someone who has it figured out at all. In fact, I'm a 54-year-old woman who I just keep getting surprised every day at how God keeps bringing my family and my life together. Failed marriage in my 20s has led to a 20-year marriage with Matt. My body's inability to have children biologically has led to the joy of being able to be Chase and Jackson's mom. And the very legalistic background that I grew up in, where I was confident that God just wanted to smite me, has grown into me being able to experience God's grace and His abundance in such personal and caring and loving ways. As Matt and I do premarital counseling with couples, I see young families God's best during that specific season of life. And so my hope is that during our time together, whether you are single or divorced or have a full house of kids or you are an empty nester, whatever is the definition of your family, that by sharing some highlights and some detours in our life, that we help you consider how you draw closer to God and how you can celebrate what God's doing in your family and how you can pursue His great purpose for you individually and as a group together. So before I met Matt, I married young, And after what I thought was a really good marriage, it ended in divorce after 11 years. I didn't grow up with the pressures of social media, thank goodness, but I did grow up with 90s rom-coms and Disney fairy tales. And so this marriage from the beginning was full of missed expectations and a whole lot of pretending, putting on a persona that we never really were. And what was actually happening behind the scenes, we were two people living very different lives. The divorce was painful and it was messy, and it really ended up being a turning point for me where I said, God, I want you to help me see what marriage is really about. And so during that season, I went to see a mental health counselor, a Christian counselor, and that person helped me reveal something that I had not realized and helped me reveal that I was a workaholic. Even though I was in a church and I was in ministry, I was treating my ministry as a mistress in the same way that my husband was treating his mistresses as a mistress. And what I realized was the counselor called me out and said, what would it look like if you worked as hard at your marriage as you worked at your job? And that changed everything for me. I did everything I could to try to fight for that first marriage, but you can't fight for a marriage by yourself. And so once I realized he was done and the marriage was over, I prayed and I asked God, if I ever get the chance to do this again, please help me do it differently. So a few years later, Matt and I had been friends and coworkers, and we started hanging out with a group of friends. And one day over the poker table, I'm looking across and I see him differently. I had always seen him as smart and funny and steady, but he was starting to look attractive to me. And, and he's very humble too. But I saw him differently. And he says that he started to see me differently too. And so we started going out with some groups of people. And one night there was a couple who was very bent on matchmaking. And we were in the car with them. And they, at that moment, needed to go into Walmart to get some toothpaste. And so that left us alone in the car together, and that started a conversation that never really ended. We talked for hours. We talked for days. We've talked for months. And then 1 year later, Matt took me to that same Walmart, and right there in the parking lot, he got out a basin of water and a towel, and he washed my feet, and he said that he wanted to spend the rest of his life serving me, and he asked me to marry him. It was pretty good.
Let's go.
Yeah. Take notes. But let's all admit that as creative as Matt is, he did not think of that himself. He was modeling that act after the greatest servant of all time, Jesus. And I knew that when I said yes to Matt that day, that I was saying yes to a lifetime of serving together and serving each other in the way that God or in Jesus models love to all of us. So this time around, it was different. We dated very intentionally. We put God first. We stayed committed to church and studied the Bible together. We even leaned into counseling, both mental health and financial counseling. Before my first marriage, I treated sex very casually. With Matt, we fought hard to wait. And what blows my mind is that I went from being married to a man who treated sex so casually, so cavalierly, that he had sex with multiple women while we were married, that now God had me marrying a man who at 29 had waited for marriage. Needless to say, our engagement was very short, only 2 months, and we got married in the morning during brunch so that we could get to the honeymoon as soon as possible. We have a picture of our wedding up here, and even it was different. During that day, or during my first marriage, I was so focused on the event. I was so focused on the dress and the decorations. I can even remember walking down the aisle and thinking about the guests so much that I wasn't even focused on the man that I was marrying. But with Matt, it was all about becoming his wife. In fact, you'll notice I don't even have my flowers with me because I was so caught up in the moment and what was happening, I forgot to go to the refrigerator and pick my flowers up. Because it wasn't about the flowers. This whole wedding was about becoming Matt's wife and spending our life together.
You know, Janie shared the story of how she was influenced by 90s like sitcom or rom-com movies and Disney fairy tales. I remember one that really started that whole genre in that age was When Harry Met Sally, right? And there's this one, like the through line through that entire movie is, can a man and a woman be friends without the relationship getting in the way? And to my answer to that question was like, absolutely not, right? Because my whole 20s was really focused for me about finding the one. Finding the one. So I went through all these young women dating, like, is this the one? And then when I would find a flaw in her, as they all did, and I would quickly discard her onto the next one to find the one. And I got to a point of such desperation, like, I just want to get married. I want to find the one. I even proposed and was engaged to someone before Janie. And matter of fact, this is when Janie was married, right? And I was engaged, and her husband at the time said to Janie, hey, what if we mentor the youth pastor and his fiance in our relationship, because it's going so well. So we actually went on a double date one time, and Janie's two truths and a lie is one, what tell it?
Well, that I one time went on a date with both of my husbands at the same time.
That's awesome right there. My point of that is I was so focused on trying to find the one that I was neglecting putting God as the one in my life, the number one pursuit of my life. And if you're single in this room right now, if you're married in this room right now, your spouse isn't your number one. That person that you want to date isn't the number one. God is your number one. And when you get that relationship right, everything else falls into place. And I made that commitment. And I think the fact that God had Janie and I working in the same church for 6 years gave me an opportunity to do something I never did with all the other relationships in my life. And that just built a friendship. We had 6 years of friendship building. We had 6 years of just respect, getting to see how each other operate in the job and in the workplace and the ministry together. And so when Janie all of a sudden became single and we became hanging out around the poker table, it was like, God, there's actually a foundation, a really good thing to build on here, and it changed everything. Now, it doesn't mean our relationship is perfect. We all bring baggage into our relationships. I call them the 3 H's, our habits, our hurts, and our hang-ups. I brought into our marriage $30,000 of credit card debt. Yeah. And I had to tell her that early on in our dating, like, hey, if you want to go down the aisle with me one day, you know that this is also coming down the aisle with me. And you know what she said? Let's tackle it together. Janie had in her baggage was some massive trust issues. You know, I had to pay for the sins of the guy who came before me, right? I hadn't been unfaithful to her, but she told me, like, I would call him and he wouldn't answer. I would call him and he wouldn't be where he said he was going to be. He wasn't congruent. So I had to prove to her, and this has helped in the premarital counseling time, in the dating, in our counseling sessions, of the counselor helping to understand, like, if you really want to show her that you love her and you're in this to win this, to invest in your relationship, you better show her you're trustworthy. So I took my phone with me everywhere. And I mean everywhere. I never, and if I was in a meeting, I would stop the meeting. Janie's calling, hey, just want to make sure you know I'm in a meeting. I'll call you after this. Even one time I was mowing my grass in our house, and I put the phone down for a moment to bag the grass. And during that time, the phone was on vibrate, and it rolled off the mower, and I started the mower and ran over my phone, and it was in pieces. That's a true story. But this was the way of me serving Janie, of showing her I'm being very intentional and that she could trust me. And this doesn't mean that we don't argue in our marriage, in our life. You heard earlier that we were arguing a few weeks ago, and we argue differently. In my house growing up, we avoided conflict. In her house growing up, it was like World War III. So when we argue, man, I want to like bail from the conversation. I want to bail from the argument as soon as possible. And she's like, let's get into the ring, no holds barred. We are different. She's an extrovert in the life of the party. I'm an introvert. I'd rather stay at home. She likes to get up early. I want to stay up late. She's good with money. I like to spend it. As $30,000 of credit card debt shows. She's generous. I'm not so generous. She builds good boundaries in our parenting. I'm more of the nurturer in our family. I'm a visionary. She's the person who likes to make the vision a reality. She likes to talk things through, and I like to process internally. And even though we're different, we have learned to look at our strengths and focus on those instead of the weaknesses that we bring to the party. There's a quote by Francine Klagsburn in a book called Staying Together in the Age of Divorce that I think is really good. She says, couples that stay together found an ability to forego perfection to be vital for relational satisfaction. The most devoted couples continually focus on their relationship strengths. And with that outlook, they are able to enhance what's good so that it becomes the core of the relationship while the negatives become peripheral. Man, if there's a next step here for some of the couples in this room, here's what I would say. Go on a date, go to coffee, grab drinks, grab lunch, and bring what are the strengths of the other person and share those openly with them. These are your strengths. And let them share your strengths. And then begin to talk about how those really enhance the relationship. There's a lot of negatives that we all bring into our marriage, into our relationships. And here's why. We saw it with Adam and Eve. Here's the math equation that proves it. Marriage is one sinner plus one sinner that equals two sinners. And then you have a lot of little sinnerlings, right?
So yeah, we two sinners became parents through adoption, and we have a picture of us here as a young family with our little sinnerlings. This is obviously when we're all shinied up for a wedding that Matt was officiating, because when you have kids this age, you never look this put together for sure. But I love that Chase and Jackson are both biological brothers and adoptive brothers. We brought Chase home at 8 months old from Taiwan, and then 4 months later got a call that he had a biological brother. And so actually 15 years ago today, we went back to Taiwan and brought Jackson home when he was 6 months old. So we're celebrating Jackson's Mehaffey Day today as well as Mother's Day. For me, yeah, a lot to celebrate. For me, parenting is a constant recalibration. It's a dying to self so that I can serve the needs of my family. So that means that I try to get up early. I know that I need to spend time every morning with God, with my Bible, in prayer time, getting myself adjusted before I'm ready for all of the people in my head. Sometimes dying to self means being silent when a boy is angry or frustrated, and knowing that I need to ask for God in that moment to help me to respond and not react, which is the very tempting thing to do. And then sometimes it means apologizing, but actually it always means apologizing. I apologize a lot. And I love that our boys see that we don't get it right, but we're working really hard to talk about what it means that we're doing wrong and how we want to do it better. Matt and I work really hard to prioritize God and the Bible in our home. And that has looked really different in different seasons. We have a few pictures of some of our family times together. And when the boys were really little, we embraced technology. We said we're going to redeem it for good, and we loved the Bible app. I cannot recommend it enough because it helped the boys learn that the Bible is full of so many great stories. Some, that they don't need to know until they're older because they are a little messy. But when they have those little stories, when they're little on the Bible app, and they're engaging in a way, they realize that God's word is fun and it's engaging. And then as they got older and we would do family reading time before bed, we would read different books, but we would always end our reading time with the Jesus Storybook Bible. I love this Bible so much. It's actually the narrative we used for the Good Friday service if you went through that experience. But what I love about it is that it so sweetly and beautifully weaves the story of Jesus through the Bible. It shows how Jesus was the plan from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And I can't hear parts of that story without still getting a little weepy. And so now that the boys are older and they need to have agency in their own personal relationship with Jesus, it looks different. We do family Bible studies together as a family. Sometimes it's in the Bible app. The Bible app has where you can share a Bible story or study and then type out your discussions. So we discuss it on our phones. And then sometimes it's actual paper studies where we do workbooks together. And so the way that looks is we get up in the morning and everybody has their individual quiet time before school or before work. And then once a week or once every other week, as schedules allow, we come together in our living room and we discuss what we're learning. Now, lest you look at that picture and you think, oh, that's some kind of holy of holies in the Mehaffey household. Please know that these conversations are not always life-changing and robust. In fact, sometimes I don't even want to be there. Sometimes I'm so tired or just annoyed by them or whatever is the reason in our humanness. And I don't want to do it. But we work really hard to show up and protect that time and make it happen. And I can tell you without fail that every single time we do, I walk away feeling more grounded and more connected to Jesus and more grateful that we have this group to do life with together. Now, something that I personally struggle with in pursuing God's best for my family and for myself is managing expectations. So sometimes that's expectations I put on myself because of comparison. So comparison to what other families are doing or what other families are portraying as successful. Sometimes it's expectations of the boys themselves and them having expectations on me based on what they think they need versus what they really need. And unfortunately, sometimes those unrealistic expectations have come from Christians. So as a young mom especially, and a pastor's wife, I used to have and feel a lot of pressure for the boys to behave in a certain way. I can remember a worship service at our previous church where the boys and their friends were in the aisles and they were going wild. They were dancing and singing. And I looked at them and I thought, that is so fun. I wish that I had learned to worship God that way. That's just amazing. And I looked around at the other people around the aisle, and some of them were in their own worship experience, doing their own thing. Some were smiling at the boys, but there were some who were looking at them with such grumpiness on their face, and looking at the boys, and looking at me, as if, why can't you get your kids to behave? So fast forward to that Christmas Eve, and I was really not liking church at all. And so we show up, and I'm like, it's Christmas. I'm going to take some pressure off the boys, and we're going to sit in the back. So we sat in the back, and we sat on the platform that holds the video cameras, a similar worship service to this. And at first, things were going pretty good. And then all of a sudden, Chase got down on the floor, and he started crawling under the platform. And he's like playing with the wires and digging around. I'm like, oh gosh, what do I do? Do I call him out? Do I just let him be? And so I decided to pray. And I said, God, please help him to settle down. And at the very least, help him to not knock over a camera and destroy this whole worship service and create chaos. And just a minute later, Chase came out from under that platform, and he came and he tapped me on the leg. He said, Mama, I just heard God tell me to do that thing. I said, what thing? And he said, that thing that Dad's talking about. God just told me I need to get baptized. And so Chase got baptized on New Year's Eve. And what I realized in that moment, here I was distracted by how he was behaving and worried about him being a distraction when God was wooing his little heart to him. That moment was so sweet and so precious to me because he made me realize that my job as a parent is not to curate behavior. My job is to focus on our hearts and to point our boys to Jesus, to point myself and my own heart to Jesus. And out of that, then the behavior that's like Christ will flow out of it. Jesus didn't come to give us a bunch of legalistic rules. He came to bring us freedom. And that was such a beautiful, liberating moment for me as a parent. That's why I love Discovery Church, because Discovery Church is the kind of place where my kid can end up in a trash can at youth group and it seems perfectly normal. Nobody questions when these kinds of things happen, because our church is about the heart and not about the crazy behavior that happens around this place. One other thing that Matt and I have to be really intentional about in our parenting is prioritizing our marriage. And so sometimes that means that we have to recalibrate regularly there too. And we have to stay aligned on what's essential for us and while also respecting each other's parenting styles. I can remember when the boys first came home from Taiwan, I had to be really careful not to criticize how Matt changed diapers or fed the boys or roughhoused with them, because I learned very quickly that that was a sure ticket for him to relinquish the care to me being the only responsible person for it. And so I learned to celebrate our differences and lean into those while also making sure that we are aligned and grounded and unified on the things that are essential for keeping our family focused on Jesus. Prioritizing our family also means prioritizing time for each other. And that's really hard with kids around. When they were little, we would fight through the exhaustion at the end of the day. The boys would go to bed earlier then, and we would fight through being tired so we could stay up, have focused conversations, and spend time together. And now that they're older and their schedules are the boss of us and dictating life for us, we still fight to put dates on the calendar and time on the calendar together so that we make sure we're staying aligned and staying calibrated and putting God first and our marriage second. Every season of parenting brings its own challenges and opportunities. I can remember there's a picture we have that I saw the other day, and I just remember the heaviness of that time when the boys were little and wishing away the days when they're so physically reliant on you. And some of you moms know that sometimes going to Target by yourself is like a spa treatment. I talked to a mom the other day out in the lobby, and her boys are getting a little older, and she said, I feel like I'm finding parts of myself that I had lost. And I totally remember being in those moments and feeling that way. I'm sure it's hard for those of you who are in that season to realize this, but when I look back and I know how heavy things were then, I also see how holy those moments were. There was joy, and there was grit, and there was love, and there was this kind of intentionality that actually really is paying off today. So for those of you who are in the same phase of life with us, having teenagers now, I've got no wisdom for you. We are in the trenches. I think one of the reasons I was hesitant to come up here with Matt is that because there is really not a clear roadmap for this current season. When the boys are little, you got to keep them safe. You got to feed them. You got to pray a lot. But now, protecting really shifts to preparing for the adulting that is right around the corner. It's less about instructing and more about influencing. I can coach. I can offer principles. I can be intentional. But at the end of the day now, it's really between them and God. I am very glad that at Discovery we have families who we're in community together with, that we are doing life together. It's why I think that the baseball field and the track meets are holy ground and sacred spaces, because we are figuring this out in real time. We're praying for our kids. We're hoping for the best for them, hoping they'll make good choices. And in all of that, we are trusting that God has them and loves them even more than we do. And He is going to help them lean into the extraordinary that He has prepared them for.
Yeah, neither of us have jobs that we can kind of close up shop, turn the key, and check out and go, all right, work is done. I can totally engage. Ministry and in both of our jobs, we love our jobs, but there's always another need to be met. There's always another person you could call, another email to respond to. And sometimes it's really easy for us to get so focused on the job and to spend so much, because it's so rewarding to come home and give our family the leftovers. And that's something we've had to really talk through and work hard to make sure, because they deserve the best. Our family deserves the best, not just the leftovers. And part of, I think, the way God has wired me as a leader is to be a person who casts a vision of a better future. Like, this is where we could be. And I try to do that here at Discovery, but I need to do that at our home as well. I need to do that for our family. As a matter of fact, one thing that we have done, and these have changed over the years, we call them our Mehaffey family values. And this is what they are right now for our family. This is the vision we have for one another. The first one is work hard, play hard. All right, when it's time to work at school or in our workplaces, there's gonna be seasons of a lot of work, but there's a vacation on the calendar and it's coming. right? Or there is times we're going to take a break and we're going to be together. We're going to play hard together. And these are not values that you have to have in your home. These are the ones for us. And maybe this is another next step for you is what are the values for my family? What are the values for me? Another one of ours is to bring heaven to earth through our family, that as it is in heaven. God, how can we bring the values of heaven here on earth through the way that we live our lives as a family in our neighborhood, in our schools? We want to make it hard for our friends to go to hell. We believe hell is a very real place and very real people that we know are headed there without Jesus in their life. And so we want to show Christ in a very real way to our friends and to people around us. We want to grow roots into Christ daily. Janie talked a lot about how we're doing that and have been doing that since our boys were little. Spending time in God's Word, modeling that to our sons, and then having those conversations on a weekly basis about this is what we're learning. And then we also want to see and treat everyone as the image of God. That there's things that annoy us about people. People are hard. People are challenging. But God created them in his image. And we need to see them as such and treat them as such. We don't live out these values always perfectly, but they are our values in this season and at this time we try to anchor to.
Yeah, I talked about when my counselor challenged me to spend as much time focusing on my marriage as I do my job. I've had that carry forward, and I try to be real intentional to save my best for our family more than my job, but I have to pray a lot about that, to steward my relational energy best for Matt and the boys. And sometimes Matt will kindly call me out for that. He'll be like, on a full day of Zoom, my job is very people-y, and so I'm on Zoom a lot, and he'll be like, hey, so you were really nice to them on that call, and you really were encouraging, and do you realize you're not really showing up that way for us here? And I get really annoyed when he does that at first, and then I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I'm so glad that God has given me Matt to call me out and gives me second and third and fourth chances to do better with my people. And so when I'm tracking and when I am right with God and have my priorities right, I bring my best, Proverbs 15 encouraging words to Matt and the boys. I put on my people development hat and I bring my best stuff. I make them know their Enneagram numbers. I make them do TED Talk style presentations. And we even do an annual year-end review with allowance negotiations. And they're pretty good at it. But what it does, I know it's nerdy, I know it's ridiculous, but the intentionality makes sure that I am taking the best that I have and the way I am developing people, and I am focusing that first and foremost on my family and helping my family figure out who we are and how God created us to be so we can live out his purpose for our lives. So I'll leave you with this last thought, and then I'll let Matt wrap things up. I know that I play a significant role in setting the tone in my home. I know that when I am staying closely connected to God, that I can experience his security, that I'm able to trust his abundance, that I'm able to know that he's caring for me. So when I do that, I know that I don't have to fight to be protected and safe, and that I don't have to fight to have my needs met. Instead, I can love my family out of the overflow of the abundance and the grace that God gives me. And that way I can focus on meeting their needs and bringing peace and patience to our home. And in doing that, my hope and my prayer is that I can help our family pursue the extraordinary that God has for each of us.
I've said this many times here at Discovery, and this is why I think this is a little bit of a weird Sunday for us. But it also is the reason why, and it tracks why we're doing this. Because I've said before, the most powerful message that I can teach on a Sunday is to honor and love my wife. It's how I parent my kids in a godly way. And I'm not perfect at it. But I want you to see me. And sometimes you think of pastors, or maybe if you come from other faith backgrounds, priests or whatever, and you think of them as they are untouchable. They are on a whole nother playing field. I'm no way I could. Yeah, you can. You can follow Christ in your marriage and your parenting in the same way that I am. And I wanted Janie to share kind of, this is the realness of things. It's not always Jesus loves me and this and that in our home. It's also the hard stuff too. So I want you to hear, this whole series is about no ordinary family, no ordinary marriage, because our world loves to tell us this is what an ordinary marriage looks like. But I don't want ordinary, and neither should you. I want a weird marriage. I want a weird marriage, a weird in a God way, in a way that shows people who don't know Christ what's different. How you treat each other different. You treat your kids different. You have expectations that are different because it's better. It's best. God's way is always best. And we want that for you. We want that for us. So we thought we'd end today with communion. And I'd ask our volunteers to go to the tables, and we're going to have a family meal together. And we're going to do things a little differently. As you take your cups, as you get your cups today, as they come through the aisles, we'll just hold on to them for a moment. And if you're not comfortable taking communion at this time, you want to pass it by, that's fine, no problem. But just hold on to them today, and we're going to take them in unison together. All right, so I'm going to ask our team to go ahead and pass the trays. And as you just hold them in your hand, just remember, we talk to God and take a moment to reflect on what He is wanting to do in your relationships, in your life right now. So let's take a moment. Would you dim the lights? Let's take a moment just to focus, and we'll take communion in just a moment when everybody has had their elements in their hands. Jesus, in the upper room, He took the bread and He broke it, and He said, "Whenever you eat this, remember my body broken for each of you." So let's take that, let's eat that together. And then Jesus took the cup. He said, whenever you drink this, I want you to remember my blood that was shed for you to cover all of our sins and our brokenness. So let's drink this together.